Now, do you know what I'm doing? I'm listening to the original soundtrack of Live Aid. Now, Live Aid is a very commendable idea. The problem is, since it started in the 1980s, poverty is still anything but history. In a way, Live Aid, which was supposed to be a means to an end, has become sort of an end in itself. Africa is still where it started off all these years ago. So, is listening to music really a replacement for real action? I think it's a bit too late for concerts now. It's time for real development policies for Africa. Welcome to a new edition of Holy Cows, all about Live Aid. And the question is, does Live Aid need Band-Aid? There you are. Now, Live Aid is a wonderful idea, no doubt. It's well intended. But the problem is it makes the whole problem of sorting out Africa too much fun, too much lighthearted. Dealing with Africa is going to involve some sacrifices. It was never going to be painless for us or for the Africans.
If you really want to institute change in Africa, you have to do a lot of rather unglamorous things. They're very hard to sell as a soundbite.
Yes.
You know, in terms of empowering African nations to run their own economies, to be less dependent on aid, those kind of things. That's quite hard to sell as a sort of pitch, you know, as a sort of, let's all get around and celebrate, I don't know, democracy in Ghana or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a harder sell than that idea of directly giving your cash to a small baby who's crying when flies around their eyes, you know. So, again, it gets back to this idea that music is very good at these simplistic sells, but it's not good for complex issues.
But has simplicity become an end in itself?
In what way?
In a sense that has concert after concert after concert made us almost immune.
I think it has.
Great music at Live Aid, but isn't it a way of drowning out African calls for a more level playing field?
I think the problem is that that's an important issue, and it hasn't been raised enough at events like Live Aid and so on, which seem more about, you know, giving aid to Africa, which is kind of a very simple thing. Whereas what will really make much more of a difference is improving the terms of trade, so allowing African farmers or African businesses or African industries to trade with us on an even footing. And that hasn't happened.
So, in return for aid to Africa, we asked the African governments to have better governance, to be more democratic, you know, all these conditions. And we impose on them a whole bunch of development policies which are more to do with our sensibilities than their current conditions. For example, take child labor. We tell them to prohibit child labor. And of course, the musicians of Live Aid, they automatically back this up, stop child labor, but what they don't tell you is that products made in Africa by children are a lot cheaper than products made in the West by people with pension plans and who belong to unions. So really, it's not for the children that we're doing it, it's more for us. Do the musicians know this? Do they know what they're signing on to? And of course, the children who end up giving up work, as happened in Bangladesh, end up turning to prostitution to make ends meet because they're usually the only people bringing money into the family. That was very clever, huh? And of course, if they complain, in the third world, what we do is we just turn up the volume. Isn't the danger with Live Aid the fact that it makes helping Africa seem like a dawdle, almost easy, pleasurable music, when in fact we know that when we drop these tariffs, we might lose jobs because African products will be cheaper?
Yeah, I think that is the problem. I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this case. Unfortunately, we will have
no lunch at all if you're African.
Well, no, quite. I mean, but we are the ones who have it within our power to make a difference here. Unfortunately, we'd have to make some sacrifices. And it's not just the sacrifice of paying, you know, £50, £100 to go to an excellent concert. I mean, it's a sacrifice of potentially losing your job. And that's the problem here. You know, that's why these have been such difficult decisions to take and why we haven't got there yet.
Now, there's no chance of us dropping the common agricultural policy, which has devastated Africa. And there's even less chance of the World Trade Organization wrapping up its Doha trade round that seems to go on forever. So we needed to invent a new kind of aid concert, to make a difference. And we've come up with one. Now we can invite Mandela over, give him a birthday cake, and of course, let him have a concert. Now, I know he's a symbol of his own people, but giving a 90-year-old token African a birthday cake is really a drop in the ocean. If you really want to make a difference, why don't you invite his fellow 1 billion Africans, all of them, to come and have their birthdays over here? Now, I bet that's going to make you stop listening to the music and actually start doing something.